what's up? Welcome to Shelf Stories, the channel that tells tales from games, books, and life, and welcome to the One Stop Co-op Shop podcast. My name is Jason. Thank you so much for stopping by for this latest chat with friends. This is part 2 of my interview with Thurot the Space-Biff, talking about content, talking about what we're doing as media personalities, content creators, whatever you want to call us. And, well, I mean, that the words matter. Deconstructing what some of these words mean. For the first part of the episode, we talked about content and what that means. And, not everyone takes that word the same way. Dan and I take it a little bit more negatively, coming from the history end of things than, another content creator would, which is totally fine. We break down all that and implications and having a critical conversation about what we're doing. And, are we, what we put out, is that what is received, and all sorts of dimensions. So rather than present the entire conversation in one piece, which I could have, I wanted to break it apart to allow separate space to digest in terms of what we're presenting. So the first part was about content. The second part is, I guess, we drill down on an aspect of what is made in board gaming, which is maybe a little bit more difficult, which is the preview. So the preview, in a way, is kind of the worst expression of content because it is at the very crux of hype, of the cult of the new. If there is a negativity or if there is a cynicism that is bred in the community, it's kind of here. In terms of, when I see a preview, what am I seeing? Are they paid? Are they not paid? Can I trust it? Can I trust it? Wow. So we get into a lot of that conversation. I wanted to put this as a separate section. Going to have another edit a little bit further into the episode, but for now, let me go ahead and throw it over to the Space-Biff and myself having a conversation about previews. Here we go. Although, I'll put a giant asterisk in that because I think that underscores that underplays the role of the preview. And I don't think that there is any bigger example of content and the worst example of the word than a preview.
Well, now we're hitting on something that to me is a bit of a curse word. Especially with the way that we use it, and it's just such a board game sphere thing.
Go ahead. Yeah, I got time. Go for it.
Well, are we not like the only medium in which a preview has an expectation that it's going to be paid? I just find it super weird.
What do you mean by that? Break that down.
Well, so are we using the same definition? Like, so a preview being, so it's a professional thing to do a preview. There's an expectation that it will have, that it will be paid. So here's what I mean. So I do very occasionally what I would call a preview, and I do not accept publisher payment for anything I do. So to me, a preview is that, let's say that a company wants to kickstart a game that I think is interesting. And maybe they know me from a previous collaboration. So they reach out and they're like, hey, do you want to play this game? And write about it before the Kickstarter to generate some buzz. And because I know these people and I know that they do quality work, I'll say, sure, I'll take a look at it. And now I try to limit this. I don't want to do, 50 Kickstarter previews a month. But, one a month, I think is fine. So it's just super weird to me that I can't write on my site, this is a preview, without getting a whole bunch of people mailing me to ask if I was paid for it. Mm-hmm. Like, if I preview a book, I don't have to say that I was paid. Mm-hmm. I just find it really weird that this is like the only industry I've really noticed that in. And I could be off base. What do you think?
I mean, I think like it goes back to our previous conversation about board gaming as commodity. Like the idea that like we consider board games commodities in a way that we would never consider books commodities. Mm-hmm. I think that when we talk about a book, there's still this, I don't want to speak in generalities, but I think that there's this tendency to see, a book is still like, has value in it, and it has like, inherent, you're going to read it, it's going to be fun. And it's not like a collector's item in the same way that a board gaming wall would be a collector's item. Right. I mean, but board games, like, I think that, we're streaming upstream. I think that the majority of people don't consider board games as art or culture.
Yeah.
I think that they're commodities. And so when a publisher is kickstarting something or they're launching a pre-order, whatever it is, like they are selling a game. They're making
Mhm.
art. They're not making cult. They're selling a game. And then anybody who is on in that team, because because the larger populace can't like, they don't have access to it.
Mhm.
So the only people that have access to it are people whom the publisher allows, and the
Mhm.
publisher has no interest whatsoever because they're not producing art; they're producing a commodity. They have no interest in whatsoever besides what which outlets will increase sales. So
Mhm.
then on the consumer end, I can see this wave of cynicism.
Yeah.
Like, wait a minute, no one else has seen this. Like only people that the publisher is gatekeep. There is no independent media. Like you did that post today about like you can't send it. I can't send the board game to the New York Times. I can't send the board game to
Right.
these independent outlets. I can only send them. The publishers can only send them to these people who they bless, basically,
Right.
right? And it becomes this like, on the consumer end, I can totally see that okay, why would the publisher give this to somebody who would talk negatively about it?
Mhm.
And even though you do, like I read some of your previews, they're like,
Well,
yeah,
and it takes a particular sort, I think. So I do have a great example. So many people know him because he's sort of become one of the publishing and board games darlings lately. But Cole Worley.
yeah,
So Cole and I get along pretty well. He has a background that is pretty much history. It's more on the like literary side
mm-hmm.
than my work, but we both view things very historically. So I was a fan of one of his early games, the first of his published games,
John
Pax
Company.
Pamir.
Oh, Baxmere, okay.
Yeah, and he sent me a preview copy of Pax Pamir's second edition, which was very different from the first edition. And yeah, my preview had some pretty negative points in it. Now, to Cole's credit, I think Cole is someone who approaches pretty much everything he does with such intentionality
Mm-hmm.
that, yeah, I think he was a little bummed. I reached out and I was like, hey, it seems like maybe you're not feeling too great about this preview. And he was like, no, it's fine. But he seemed a little bummed.
Yeah, sure.
But as we talked about that preview, and it was very generous of him. He made some changes based on one of the recommendations I made in that preview. And so I'm listed in the rule book. He says, thank you. I don't know. I haven't looked at it too recently. I don't read my accolades. But I think that's a good example of somebody who approached a preview with the mentality that he wanted to actually make something meaningful. Mm-hmm. But I also know that Cole is maybe not the best example of the mean. All of his games are doing something like that. They're all saying something. But I would like to see more of that mentality, that there can be more than just pushing product. A preview can be more than just a paid advertisement.
There's so much pressure for it to be just that.
There is. And I don't want to undersell
like,
that.
Like the whole thing of Call to the New, you talk to publishers like, okay, I will sell 85% or more of my stock of this game in the first X amount of weeks. And if I miss that window, then I'm just going to have a warehouse full of, games forever. And so just the nature of the beast, like, more and more games, shove them down down people's throat like a goose until they pop.
Well, and part of my ethics policy is, of course, that I don't get paid, but that's a nice little amelioration, of course, but there's also a pressure that really no ethics policy can handle, which is access. If a well-known publisher who excites me reaches out and wants to show me something exclusive, which that means that I am now being incentivized to be positive so that I can keep having that access. To me, that is a far greater pressure than money.
Right.
Now that might not be true for everybody.
To me too. Like, if I get I've gotten preview from people, I'll name them. I'm good friends with like Tristan Hall and Frank, and Frank West less so, but like, Tristan Hall, Richard Wilkins, Ricky Royal, we've talked a number of
Yeah.
times. People who Rory O'Connor, I reviewed one of his games, Combo Clash, and it was not a great review, and it hurt me. It's like,
Yeah.
I want to give this good review, I can't do it. Or like I gave it a middling review. Like, did I give it a middling review, not a bad review? I have to ask this question actively of myself. I definitely find relationships more, because it goes back to the idea of attention.
Right.
These are people who are in my hobby. They are producing the things that I love, and I have their attention.
Right.
Wow, that's like better than money in some way.
Right. And it's super
yeah.
cool to be shown something early, isn't it?
It's super cool. It's like super cool to be trusted.
Yeah.
And I do find that more biasing. Not. Do I want to say more biasing? Is that what you want to say? Like more biasing than like payment?
Yeah, you could say that.
Okay. Is that how you feel?
I think personally for me it is. Now, I mean, it's kind of the same thing. I feel like I would navigate that okay, because to me, I have to constantly remind myself that my loyalty lies with my audience, not with this publisher or designer. But it can be really hard. And I hope that I'm not pulling my punches, but some of what makes bias tricky is sometimes you don't even know, that you're being influenced.
Right.
Even that. So one of the things I try to do is every year I write an article about the previous, how did the previous year's best hold up a full year later? And the only reason I do that really is to try to at least keep my biases in check a little bit by going back and saying, okay, so I said that this was one of the top 20 games of the year. Was it? Or did that just totally, once I said that, did it disappear, from my radar, or I played it later and it stunk? I think it is useful as people who want to navigate an ethical minefield to revisit ourselves now and then. But that's not natural. I mean, nor is it easy. That's actually one of the hardest articles I write every year, just because it's basically a huge mea culpa. Right. I'm going back and saying, well, I was wrong about like a third of the stuff I said, which, the upside is I do think there's so much cynicism that, a lot of people mention that being one of their favorite of the things I write. I think it is refreshing here's the problem, Jason. Even this makes me feel a little cynical that you can that trying to be forthright is basically a sales tactic.
Yes. It's you're reassuring the people. Yes, I'm not a shill. Yes, and this.
Right. And as someone who has no interest in pushing these things as products, but maybe I do want people to connect with games that will bring them happiness and connection, and enlightenment or whatever. That is a tension that I have to deal with, is that, I want people to trust me and I try to go out of my way to make them trust me. And I don't want that to be a sales tactic either. I want that to be genuine.
Right. Yeah. I mean, so this is where I run afoul. My personal views run afoul like other folk, because I think the strong instinct on the consumer end is that, money is biasing. Don't take money. If you take money, you're bought and sold and all that kind of stuff. And I just don't have as much of a problem with it. Like I don't take any money either. And again, Shelf Stories is always going to be ad free. It's always going to be for like, this is my space. But if somebody is going to make the decision of like getting the payment, well, then it's in the context of like all these things, like getting a review copy is biasing. Having the attention of a publisher is biasing. Being a friend with a publisher is biasing. Why are we drawing a line at payment?
Well, and oddly, I actually think that for me, one of the things that's most biasing is retail therapy. That having paid money for a game often biases me for it.
Yeah.
Because I'm justifying the decision to drop $70 on a game. So I kind of pull something like The Theater Goers and Huckleberry Finn, where I'm like, no, it's great. And you're a fool if you don't love it. And, there's, like you're saying, there are so many intersecting pressures on us
Mm-hmm.
that it can be genuinely difficult to navigate.
If someone wants to like it, if it's important to them, because because we're not talking about Bugattis and Maseratis, we're talking about just $50 here, $70 there. Like if someone wants to say, okay, they're gonna take money for whatever XYZ previews, paid reviews, ooh man, we're entering a minefield there. But like in terms of the preview, then as long as like my thing is like but it's like now you're hitting the iron law of transparency. Like you got to be transparent. You got to hit that button. You got to speed because there's actually a code of ethics about that, like in terms of like the FCC. Like if you
Right.
take any kind of compensation that has to be stated clearly, so like do that. But like if someone's gonna say like take this money and like do a preview, there's so many sources of bias that I can't like I can't justify for myself drawing a line between payment and the other things,
Mhm.
and it's it opens a door, right? And it triggers people's cynicism. And am I triggering a person's cynicism, or am I triggering the consumer's cynicism? And that's where
Mhm.
I want to ask also a question in terms of like who to talk to, because like if I'm in a trusting relationship with somebody, like you talk about you built them, and like you let them know, it's like, oh yeah, I'm gonna take this little bit of money, and they have a relationship with you, it's like, oh yeah, I you do your thing, there's more likely to kind of be that. But if it's a consumer, ugh, and running into the kind of teeth of the consumer mindset, that messes me up.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For me, whenever I'm trying to judge, who should I give the value of my opinion to, uh, not so much my opinion maybe, but my esteem. Who am I going to listen to, especially when there's so many competing voices? I don't know if there's any way that has worked for me except basically after the fact. If this person recommended me a game, whether they were paid or not, did I end up liking it? Was it valuable to me?
Yeah.
And I think everyone ends up kind of going through that self-selection where, you know, is this person useful to you in a certain way? Now, for me, I hope to write things that are useful, at least in the sense that even if you don't play a game, I hope we can at least have a discussion about certain games and find them interesting. Um, and that's one reason why I keep returning to this idea of just divorcing it from this commercial context. Like I would love to be able to, and I don't think I succeed at this very often. But I would love to be able to write the sort of thing that people want to read after they've played a game
Mm-hmm.
or return to after they've played it 5 times, rather than be, does this guy sell me on games or not?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not sure how to go about doing that a lot of the time. Um, but just for me, that helps me escape the context just ever so slightly. Um,
Mm-hmm.
let's talk about board games in a way that maybe gets us thinking about what did this game do for me, as opposed to should I buy it or not.
Right. And so I guess like kind of talking about previews. I mean, I think we began this discussion by talking about previews as like, because you were saying before, like we're kind of in a golden age. Like there's a lot of people making stuff and more people than ever, and we're doing good on diversity stuff. But then, I think previews pull more at okay, let's now produce content, now produce like a playthrough, now produce like
Yeah.
thoughts that, and especially because we don't play our preview copies like 10 times. Like if someone's getting a prototype, you're not sitting there like, okay, I'm hammering through this prototype. It's like I'm gonna play it once and enough to learn it and then turn on the camera. So like to me, like previews become more reflective of capital C content than
Hmm.
anything that we do. And I don't know, like I mean, yeah, I'll do the occasional preview for the one stop co-op shop, but like it's not like the thing that I like, oh yeah, I have to,
Yeah.
and actually, okay, okay, so here's an example, right? So Tim Fowers, right? There's a guy.
Yeah.
He's in your state. He's around where you
Yeah.
are.
I've been to his little game design collective house.
Sent me a prototype of Paperback Adventures, the solo deck building word game.
Right.
Like that was actually really meaningful to me because like he's a guy that I really love his games. Like there it is. They got Burgle Brothers all over the place.
Yeah, there you go.
And now boarding. There it is. So I didn't even do that on purpose. And that was like really meaningful to me. So like I was actually happy to do that preview. But I just finished dumping on previews. And here I am having gotten a lot of meaningful, being able to help Tim sell his game or get the word out about his game. God, that it takes all the steam out of me. Like I'm about to launch in some kind of rant. And then it's like, oh, wait a minute. Oh my God.
Yeah. Look at us hypocrites.
Future Jason here. Going to throw in a little bit of an edit. That I really caught myself there, didn't I? In terms of, I came in hot in terms of the problems that previews cause. I'm still going to say something about that in just a second. But then I tapped into why they are so cool, why they're so awesome. It really was, I mentioned before about Tim Fowers and doing the preview for his latest game, Paperback Adventures, which was on the One Stop Co-op Shop. That was really meaningful. If you're a small creator, a small publisher, you don't have a lot of these, you can't just like shoot those previews to anyone and anywhere. And, being able to earn his trust, he had given me that preview off of the playthrough I did of Burgle Brothers 2, which you can see right there. Always going to be a part of my collection. Liked my energy and enthusiasm and said, you know what, here. And that was meaningful to me because, what does it mean to be human? Part of what it means to be human is to, when you have a good thing, share it. We don't want to hoard good things as human beings. We want to, you find a good thing, our first instinct is to find somebody else and share it. And to be able to have a new thing, a cool thing, something that no one knows about, and being able to, first of all, being entrusted with it, someone shared it with me, and then being able that, to, as a conduit, link it to other people. That's what it's all about. It's not just like, and I hadn't really reflected on that until this conversation. And, full disclosure, I'm recording this. This insert is a couple of weeks after our conversation. I've been mulling it over since then. And I guess my ultimate line about previews is that they represent the best of times and the worst of times. The best of times being, what are we about in this hobby? We're about finding cool new stuff, right? And even if it's, someone playing a game, they could be discovering new stuff in their game. So like if you play a game 10,000 times, like you ask those people, they're discovering new stuff in there and they want to share it with their, their people. If they're playing solo, they want to post about it or something along those lines. Sharing, that being the key thing. Discovering a new thing and sharing it is basic to humanity and basic to our hobby. We grow. That's how we grow. And that's why the flip side of that coin is that's where the worst of it is, because they take that, marketing and consumerism or whatever you want to say. Again, we don't go at certain people. It's kind of more of a systemic thing where we take that beautiful sharing act of human beings and it becomes commodified. And it becomes about the hype train. It's like, okay, share. If we're not sharing a preview for some of us, or for that, in terms of our relationships, in terms of our relationship with the audience and with the publisher, if we're not sharing that new thing, what are we doing in that second, more negative paradigm? So I don't know. I guess the answer, there is no answer to me. I can't find one. I'm living in the tension right now. I think I say at one point in this podcast, riding a tiger, right away. I don't know. So I think the only thing I wanted to emphasize here is I'm still thinking about it 2 weeks later. I'll probably be thinking about it, for a long time. I don't think I'll dump on previews as hard. I'm going to be very studious about who I preview. I want to be able to highlight folks who are newer, folks who are smaller, folks who have something real to say with their games. As a way of expressing my voice and my intention with how I do previews, and try not to let it get too caught up in the hype train. So would like to hear what you think, but without further ado, going to get back to Dan and the Space-Biff. We're going to wrap up our conversation. So hope you enjoy.
Hypocrites. Yeah, it's super hard. So I recently did a preview on Station Fall, which is kind of this weird, someone called it a party game for adults. No, a party game for heavy gamers in their like Board Game Geek comment. And that's the kind of crystallized statement that it just makes me so jealous because it's such a perfect distillation of what that game is. And when one of its developers, Andy Mesa, asked me to do a preview of it, I was going, I don't know. I don't know if it's good. Like, I love it, but I don't know if it's good. I don't really know how to it's so dense. And so in that case, I actually did play it like 8 times, just to even come to terms with it. But you're right. A lot of the time, I worry about the perfunctory nature of previews.
Yeah.
That we're coming and we're saying, here's this thing, therefore buy it, as opposed to let's evaluate it.
Mm-hmm. Right.
So how do you escape that energy drain that you just described?
I feel okay. So, and this it's come up with when I was like, 'cause I was actually on my way to be an academic, like my first life, right? I was a theologian. I got my theology degree. I was a master's, and they talked about like, how do you do it? Because being an academic is pretty hard, and how do you do stuff that you want to do, and versus the publish or perish obligation.
Mm-hmm.
Right? You have to publish something, and you have to get in the journal in order to get a job, to do the real things. But that is often takes you away from like the real like things that you're interested in.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And one person, they gave me the advice of twinning. It's like, look, just get used to splitting your brain. Get used to splitting your brain. I'm like, okay, this is your brain on this, and this is your brain on that. And do enough of this to get hired, and do enough of this to do enough of that to have the fun and like feel like a human being again.
Right.
And
sure.
I feel like without really meaning to, I think I'm kind of doing that.
Mm-hmm.
Is in a sense twinning of like, okay, I'm going to do a preview for Paperback Adventures, or I'm going to do previews for whatever, or like, do playthroughs, and I'm on the Dice Tower and everything. And, get the whole review copy churn thing going on, helps my family. I actually don't spend a lot of my family money on this hobby because of that hobby. And then it's like, that is a burnout inducing thing. But then I have this channel.
Mm-hmm.
And I have shelf stories, and I have conversation with people like you, intelligent people, and then I have like the diversity, because I'm a big diversity person. I want to expand the hobby, so like
sure,
anytime that I convince talk to a person and give them words to defend themselves, or talk to a person on the moderate side, like I actually get a kick out of that, of like people who don't think like me, and they're like, oh, why you're not a screaming SJW woke person. Wow, I actually learned something, and I'm like, yes, we moved the ball forward in that one. So like, I feel like I'm twinning. I don't know how successful I am at twinning,
mm-hmm.
but I feel like I'm trying.
Sure.
And in a way, like this whole conversation is a little bit schizophrenic, because there's content and then there's content, and trying to like, content in that benign sense, content as just like a descriptor.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm going to do the content as a descriptor, and that's fine. But then, I'm entering the world of content in order to get other things, view copies and attention and, clicks, so that my influence is such, my platform is such that when I do have something cultural to say, more people are paying attention.
Sure.
So riding that tiger, it's really tough.
That's cool.
I try to be as reflective as possible,
Right.
So yeah, I mean, so I think wow, we went a little bit. I think I'm probably gonna split that into 2.
Oh, okay.
The preview stuff and
sorry to gab.
Oh no, great. No, you did it. Content. I have 2 episodes.
We've doubled the content.
Absolutely. So is there any other topics like that that bursted forward that maybe you kind of like, put in the pin in, or like another thread of conversation that you wanted to pursue, or do you think we've pretty much covered that?
No, I think this has been great, and it's given me some things to think about, which I appreciate. Thank you.
Discovery, baby.
Yeah. What is life paths without it?
New paths, right?
That's what distresses me about so much of how we think about learning, right? That we expect that we're going to go to school and then be done. How despairing is that to ever think that you'd be done learning? Right.
And making connections.
Connecting
dots in different ways. Like, I mean, I'm a big, that's my mental health thing. It's like, okay, we connect dots in certain ways, change your mind, it can change the world. Okay. I've acquired I've just learned to reconnect the dots in new ways.
Yeah.
That to me is like, oh, that's what I live for. And
Right.
that's what good games do. Like this game, Days of Fire, Nights of Fire,
Hmm.
the two games from David Turczi about the 1956 Budapest student revolution.
Sure.
Wow. Wow. I love the argument. The arguments that both of those games make. I mean, that I live for that.
Yeah.
I absolutely live for that. And so, yeah. And I did an episode kind of cover the history of that. That was meaningful to me.
Yeah. Sure.
When I got connected with Liz Davidson, we covered the history of it. And like, I think 7 people watched it, but like, no, I don't care. I don't care how many people. Meaningful to me. So I'm going to go for it.
Yeah.
So, all right, man. Dan Thurot, this was amazing. Please don't be a stranger.
Yeah. Thank you so much for having me on.
If you can change your mind, you can change the world, people. So until next time, hey, everybody.
See ya.